As interest in community, social responsibility, work-life balance, and ethics has increased in the world of business, an interest in spirituality has followed. Today's guest wrote this in her dissertation, Practicing Sacred Encounters. And it's this idea that spirituality may have a part to play in the workplace that informs the central theme of today's conversation. If work is sacred, or has the potential to be sacred, how do we learn to lead in a way that ensures employees can experience this in the workplace? As is the habit at the Comfy Chairs, I'd like to start with examining word meanings. For starters, sacred, while most commonly associated with specific religious practices, can also be defined beyond any one form of religion. Essentially, it describes something that has been dedicated or set apart for a special purpose, typically religious or divine. Today, I want us to focus on the idea of purpose, that when we dedicate something, like work, to a special purpose, we are saying it has meaning. And meaning matters in all areas of our lives. These days, this is especially true at work. But before I go any further, I'll pause to welcome my guest and allow her to introduce herself. Peggy, welcome to the Comfy Chairs.
Thank you, Kate. I am really excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes.
My name's Peggy Mark. I am in the state of my work called preferment, which is that I have moved past my full-time employment, and now I am a consultant with Breakthrough LLC, and I consult on leadership, primarily in healthcare organizations. I do have a strong focus and interest and personal value around relationships and connection. And that's why this topic of spirituality is so important to me, because I believe that's all very connected.
I agree entirely. And that's something I actually want to get to next. I talked a little bit about the meaning of sacred, but I'd like us to have a working definition for spirituality as well. Mm-hmm. So based on not just your study, but also your experiences, how do you define spirituality?
I'm gonna tell you a definition of spirituality that did come out of the literature, but prior to that, when you look at leadership literature and you look at spirituality, there's not an agreed upon definition of spirituality. Mm-hmm. A lot of people go down the road of it has a religious definition.
Yeah.
And so some of the literature is based on doctrine and the different religious doctrine. Others believe that it's broader than that and broader than religion. So as I went through my research, what I wanted to do is find that definition that worked for me, and I believe is particularly important to speak to healthcare, because that's my background. So I have spent 42 years in the healthcare industry. I'm a nurse by education, and I was studying a healthcare environment. So I was really fortunate in my doctoral work to have one of my committee members, Dr. Peter Vale, who has, since passed, but was just an incredible mentor during the time I was doing my research. And so I chose Peter's definition of spirituality. And if you haven't read any of his books, I would encourage you to just go back and find Peter Vale and read his books on leadership. So the definition of spirituality that I chose is that it's a very personal process occurring over time, and at each moment expressing that person's sense of meaning of life, of what the important questions are, of the significance of people and things around them, and of the direction their personal journey is taking. The main point when I think of spirituality, and as I've built that into my practices and into my work, is really about purpose and meaning. Mm-hmm. But I think the understanding that it's a dynamic process, that as a person interacts with others, as a person matures, as a person has new life experiences, their definition of spirituality might change. Mine might be one way today, but when someone in my family becomes ill, or when I face a personal crisis, or when I walk in nature, I might think of it just a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. So it's important to think that it's not one thing. It is a moving, dynamic process with individuals, but it's also very personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I come from a Christian background, and that doctrine is what informs my spirituality. And I'm also very aware, sensitive to, and actually celebratory of the fact that it is individual and unique, because I think, and that fits into my personal framework, because I think we're all unique creations. So, of course, the way we think and feel about how we engage with things inside and outside of us,
Yeah.
you know, whether that's our spirit or the spirit around us, of course, it's going to be different and unique. So I love hearing that personal process really being central. And you highlighted, you know, family and end of life and nature, that those are sort of the points in our lives where we tend to be more reflective of that. And I would imagine it's accurate to say that you and I both think that work should also have an element of that.
Oh, you are very accurate in saying that, because I think, knowing you and working with you, our beliefs are about the whole person. And I also think in our industry in healthcare, it's about healing, and it's about that whole person. And so how do you address healing without understanding and incorporating spirituality, not only into the definitions or the way that we believe people we're working with live their lives, but in how we live ours, and bringing our values, our spirituality to our work?
Yeah. I'm digging through my notes because some of the research I did preparing for our conversation, I found an article that will be linked from Gartner that talked about personal value and purpose at work. And one of the themes that they discussed is clarity around the fact that work is a subset of life, not separate from it. And that's been something, frankly, I've been reflecting on recently. And I think it's part of the solution to so many problems that we're having with work right now, is that we've talked so long about work-life balance that there's this idea that they're two separate things. And that's one of the reasons I think we don't talk about the spirit, the soul, or sacredness at work openly outside of certain industries or institutions, because we treat it as something separate, when work is part of life. It's just naturally part of the human experience. So
I think if we can begin to really evolve our thinking to think that way, the way I always looked at it is I would see people leave themselves at the door.
Yeah.
So they get up in the morning, be with their family, say their prayers, light a candle, whatever you do in the morning to ready yourself for the day, write a reflection, or just walk out the door and get in your car because you're running late.
Yep.
But you are you, a whole person. But then when you hit that door, you leave that fullness of you, that wholeness of you at the door. And then you walk into work and become someone else, or become a part of you.
Yeah.
And if we believe that work is a subset, if we believe that it's all part of our life, and what we choose to do is a reflection on us for many people, not for all people. Some people are, have less choice in what they do.
That's accurate.
But as you look at it as a subset of life, then it becomes more acceptable to bring that whole person to life to work as well. And then you're not always feeling that push-pull about, am I in a work mindset? Am I in a life mindset? It all becomes, you're able to express yourself.
Exactly. And it's about, am I my best self in all aspects of my life? Because I think kind of going to the whole self, people's self-worth, having intrinsic worth, that it's important for us to create environments where people not only can be their best selves, but they want to be their best selves, whether they're work life or other. And to your point, some people don't have a lot of choice in that matter, not only where they work, but how they behave. But kind of the ideal, the goal, the standard we should be setting is work environments that people want to bring their best to.
If you think about leadership theory, which I know you think about a lot, and you think about how we get things done in any organization, it is with other people. There's the
Exactly.
with and there's the through, and I believe both of those words are true, but primarily it's with other people.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, and I hope this is not coming back into our work environments, but there was that great man theory that it is
Mm-hmm.
one person at the top of the heap, and they make all the decisions, and you do as you're told,
Yeah.
basically. So you have no say so. You have a quota, and there are many organizations that are still like that for many reasons. But we've moved far, far, far down the continuum to participatory leadership, to distributed leadership, to that the relational leadership,
Transformational
and
yeah.
transformational, right? And so I believe that if we can stay on that side, the right side of that continuum, as I see it, and if we can respect, and it kind of goes back to Sacred Encounters a little bit in my thinking, if we approach each person with dignity, which is one of the tenets of Sacred Encounters.
Yeah.
If we believe that every person has worth, has inherent worth, and we also believe that they deserve dignity, and that I, as a human being, have no place in judging whether they deserve dignity or not, that they do. If we really can believe that, then everybody can more likely feel valued and find purpose and contribute to the whole and have that sense of belonging. And we also know, Kate, and I love this conversation because I know how you think as well, but we also know that sense of belonging is so important.
It is.
And so the word dignity, if you go back to Sacred Encounters, it's care, compassion, it's dignity, care, compassion, and connection. Then in healthcare, we're always looking at caring and compassion and that human connection to promote healing. But the concept of dignity is one that we say, but we all judge people so harshly sometimes. Yeah. And just to hear those words and I heard it from a manager that I was interviewing for my research, and she was describing a really, really challenging patient experience with a family member. Her staff were terrified of this family member. Ooh. They didn't know how to deal with him. He was in a terrible situation with a child who was ill. And what she said to me is what I said to my team is, I don't have the right to deserve if this man deserves dignity or not. He does, because he's a human being. And so I treated him with dignity, and she did. And he left crying and hugging her and thanking her when he came in. I mean, terrified and terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something, and I don't want us to spend all of our time talking about healthcare. And
I know
it's so important in healthcare and other service industries where you are encountering people at the worst moments of their lives, by and large. Like, nobody desires to go to the hospital. The exception that we can typically make is, people that are going to give birth to children.
Yeah.
That's the choice and the joy, and you hope it remains that way. Nobody else in a hospital setting is there with joy. And people don't behave their best under that type of duress, whether they're sick or they have a family member that's sick. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be a standard of behavior when you come in as a patient or a visitor, but caregivers or service workers need to remember that right now this is somebody that can't be their best. And part of my job is not just delivering whatever the service is, the care, I'm thinking about the insurance claim I had to make when I totaled my car in my 20s, right? I was not my best self calling my insurance company. What we need to do, though, is treat them as if, yeah, you have dignity, you have worth. And regardless of how you're coping with that, you're still worthy of respect as a human being. And it's hard. I mean, it's very hard somebody that comes in yelling at you, it's difficult not to respond that way.
Yeah, it's challenging, and I appreciate what you say a lot. And I've thought about this so much, Kate, which is in healthcare, it's easy, or I'll say maybe easy, but it's easier to take these concepts of purpose and meaning and dignity and respect and compassion and caring and healing, and it's easy to put them in the context of healthcare. I think it's also in other, like you said, service industries. I think about teaching, and again, you're dealing with a population, and you're in a service job, and you're in a caring profession. And then as you take these concepts into other parts of industry, of business, financial, the financial sector or other sectors, can you bring those same concepts in? And I believe absolutely you must. And it's more challenging. It's more difficult. That sense of purpose and the sense of belonging will take on a little bit of a different flavor. But as leaders and as people shaping companies of the future, we have to keep that in mind, and we have to understand the whole person, and we have to connect with them on that human to human level.
That's exactly right. And you took the words right out of my mouth, that it doesn't matter the industry. If you have chosen to be in a leadership role, whether that's a formal title or you are just somebody that wants to provide leadership, that is a service that you're providing. And the people that look to you for leadership, whether they're your direct reports or other members of the team, you owe them. It is your responsibility to treat them in a way that they have a whole self. It's not just about the tasks that they do or the skills that they bring. They're bigger, better, larger, more than just their work, as much as work is a part of our life.
And think about, we've all been in a situation where we have not experienced that. And many of us have been in the situation where we have. And I hope more people and more people and more people are, as we evolve as people and as leaders. The difference is stark in how you feel when you go home.
Yes.
Or how you feel during that long day of work. It makes all the difference in the world. And the thing to remember about spirituality is that, yes, it's very personal. And yes, it's about personal meaning and a sense of belonging. But it doesn't happen in isolation.
Yeah.
It happens within relationship.
Yep.
And it happens in interactions and encounters. And so as a leader, you always have the opportunity to support someone as a whole person. There's never a time where you can say, I can't, I'm not allowed, I shouldn't. You always can understand that that's a whole human being that you're in a relationship with right now.
I want to go back to something. You shared a definition in your dissertation that I think has some components of what we're talking about. And I want to highlight the language because I do believe it's going to help people get their heads and hands around it. And I apologize, I didn't make a note of from whom this comes. So I need to reference it at some point. I may
remember.
So workplace spirituality has been defined as recognizing the inner life of employees and the need for meaningful work within the context of community. So inner life, I definitely want us to spend some time talking about that, because I think the spirit, the soul, the self is what we're discussing in the space of work being sacred. And then it can't happen without the community, that there has to be a context where you're connected in some way. Relationships, whether that's in your fellow coworkers, your leader, or your employees, but also the people whom you serve, whatever kind of consumer is at the end of at the end of the stream, if you will. So let's talk about inner life and the need for connection and community.
Well, this is what I think about as I'm listening to you say that. There's Martin Buber, I believe it is, that wrote I and Thou.
I and Thou, you said?
I and Thou. There's a sense of it's a concept that I call mutuality, but it has to do with you and me. That there is, I become me through you. I become me through my relationship with you. And that's so. As I'm born and I begin to interact with the world, I am created through those interactions and through my relationships with you. And so there's a concept of mutuality that I really love, which is that, and it's along those lines, but it's that anytime I enter into an interaction, I'm entering into an interaction with a full person that has an inner life, that has spirituality, that has some sense of self, and in my belief, has that soul. You also have knowledge and experience and, worldviews that are going to be different than mine in some way. So the concept of mutuality, and I absolutely love this when I think about my life and my growth, is that no matter what that interaction is, as we enter into a relationship, into a conversation, even into an interaction or an encounter, we both leave that encounter changed.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, and think about that concept though. Think about, you and I believe that, but how many people believe that I'm coming in to tell you, to talk to you? It's very one-sided. I want you to leave changed, but I'm good the way I am.
Yeah.
And so if you believe that that's almost an impossibility, because now I've had another experience. So it's not really possible for me to leave this relationship or experience or interaction the same.
Mm-hmm.
How do I want to leave it differently? What's my intent? What do I want to gain? Even if I'm, as a leader, interacting with an employee that's having an issue, I want to leave a better person too. So I'm going to have that interaction differently so that we both leave respected and felt, I guess that we've been respected and treated with dignity.
Yeah. And again, I've been changed by even a casual encounter, never mind something as significant as a working relationship and, or a loving relationship, fill in the blank. My head is kind of spinning. I've got 17 different ideas popping around.
You just took me to that song out of Wicked.
That was in there too. Such a good song. I feel like we're talking about a couple of really key, whether they're philosophical or other. When we talk about inner life, it reminds me of I think, therefore I am. That we can know we exist because when everything else is stripped away, there's thought. Mm-hmm. So, and it's in recognizing that other people exist because there's thought, we need empathy. That the empathy plays a really important part, obviously, in leadership, stating the obvious. But if we are going to create meaning in work, if we're going to let work be sacred, then we can't do that without starting with an empathetic attitude. But I do think that part of this conversation, we need to discuss the role of empathy in making workplaces meaningful, sacred, set apart.
I think it's a perfect connection to spirituality, to sacredness, to, I'll say leadership, but really, even if we take leadership out of it, even if we say, I, Peggy Mark, want to find meaning in my work, I have a responsibility, a personal responsibility to find that meaning. And how might I find, nobody hands that to me. People can interact and I guess make me feel less than, of course. But you and I may have a interaction as peers, and that empathy that you may have for me or that I may have for you helps me build that sense of belonging and that sense of meaning and that sense of purpose in my work. So I think it's an incredibly important concept to continue to explore. And I think we have to sometimes take my sense of well-being out of the hands of my leader.
Yes.
And really own it myself. Now, I say that knowing that some environments are so toxic that that's very, very difficult to do. But theoretically, how much can I own my own sense of purpose and meaning and well-being as I go into my work environment?
Well, I go back to a couple of things. The definition that you shared from Dr. Vail, it's a very personal process.
Mm-hmm.
One of the articles that I read and shared with you, they say that ultimately what makes work meaningful is going to be unique to you and your values. That it's this funny, I'm actually reminded of the advice my mom gave me before I got married. She's like, marriage is not 50-50, it's 100-100. And leaders and employees, I think, need to take that approach. This is not a 50-50 undertaking. Leaders 100% need to be concerned with the inner life and the connections with their people. Employees need to 100% be aware of and responsible for their own well-being, personal growth, etc.
I love that it's 100-100. Your mom is very wise.
She is.
From everything I've heard you say about your mom.
She's pretty awesome. It's her birthday today, too. So.
Oh, happy birthday, Kate's
happy
mom.
birthday, Pat.
But it's a really important concept. It's 100-100.
Yeah.
And the thing that leaders have to remember is I am expected to care about my employees, and I am expected as a leader to know them and to be able to support them in ways, not only ways that are going to make their productivity higher, but ways that are going to impact the culture of the organization. And the culture of the organization is impacted positively when people feel good.
Cared for. Seen, respected. You've been very graciously letting me, ramble through this current thought I have around loving leadership. And I think that's part of what we're talking about right now is leaders need to demonstrate love. And that it doesn't mean that you're best friends with everyone. It doesn't mean that there's, a deep emotional connection. It does mean that you are wanting the best for the people that look to you for leadership. Even if you're a more transactional leader and it's about what's the give and take, approach it like, this is a horrible analogy and I will probably cut it, but what comes to mind is the way a professional chef treats their knives. This is the instrument of accomplishing the work. I will treat it well.
Mm-hmm.
People are not instruments. And even if you're a transactional leader, you need to think about, am I treating these people well so that the work gets done?
I think what you said that just stuck with me a lot, though, Kate, is that what if it is as simple as I want what's best for the people I work with?
Yeah.
What if it's like, if that's the simple mantra, that's inclusive of everything we're talking about. And it's easy to grasp and it's easy to understand. I think what happens in these conversations, and it's really why I love these conversations, is they're borderless in my mind. They're not a topic that has these firm borders. They overlap and they intertwine and they're integrated and they are synergistic. And you can talk about spirituality and empathy and love and all of those things. And they're all sort of part of this really crazy, beautiful whole that take a bit of it with you, to work if you're a leader, and you're going to be a better leader. Yeah. And it's all about the fact that, in the way I see it, is that I am connected to you because we're human beings.
Yes.
And you can't unconnect from another human being, no matter how different they are or how much you want to believe that there's this huge separation. We're connected because we're human. And if you get past a very superficial layer, which we all tend to interact with a lot and see first, if you get past this superficial layer, there is that inner space
Yeah.
There is that soul. There is that spirit. There is what that person's made of. And if you touch that, it changes you and it changes them.
That superficial layer, we're building that up. We make it thicker when we leave ourselves at the door.
Oh, yeah, we do. Definitely.
Every time we do that, we're thickening that surface layer. And it's going to be harder to have that inner true self engage with the world around us. Not just at work, I would put forward that it also means the less that we're ourselves. Anytime we turn off our authentic, genuine self, it makes it harder for us to engage with the whole world.
Leaders do that as well as people not in former leadership positions and put on that leadership mask and believe that they have to be a certain way. And to me, that it's a recipe for making huge mistakes. And the reason I say that is I bet everyone that's been in a formal leadership position, and actually people who are, peers or just in informal leadership positions, have had an experience when you're judging someone. So you're looking at that superficial layer, you're making your judgment. You're saying, what's wrong with Kate today? She's not doing her job. She's being lazy, and harshly judging other people. But what if I took a minute to take my guard down? Kate's not as productive as I would like her to be. Kate, isn't talking, or she seems to be withdrawn. And you took your guard down and we had a conversation. And I learned from you, well, my mom went in, no, not on Pat's birthday. I won't say
Thank
that.
you.
But yes,
Yeah.
I had a good friend who got ill, and she's, seriously ill in the hospital, and I'm very worried about her. My interaction is going to completely change with you, because now I've had a human connection and I understand, and I can have that empathy that we talked about, and your layer's a little thinner and my layer's a little thinner, and the day goes much better, and you go home feeling supported and valued as a person, because I've said, oh, I'm so sorry. I get it. What do you need?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a way to appropriately separate the work product, the performance, from the person, because I'm acknowledging that you may have something in your life, whether it's your head, your heart, your home, that's impacting your ability to do the job. So rather than talking about, hey, you're supposed to make 17 widgets today, Kate, and you've made 3. What's wrong with you? It's, you're not producing today. Before we talk about the work, help me understand what may be preventing you.
Exactly.
So I'm treating you with dignity. I'm respecting the fact that you're more than just what you produce, but it still leaves it open for me to manage the work product too. Because I think that's one of the kind of the leaps of false logic that some leaders make, that if I'm too focused on you as a person, it means I'm not managing your work.
I think that is a huge issue. And I don't think it takes any more time. It takes a little different energy, but it takes no time to actually speak with someone as a human being and look at them and ask those questions versus focus on the work and the productivity. And sort of, the thing that people don't understand too, and I say this with a little bit of caution, and I'll tell you why. If we actually treat other people well, and we treat other people with respect and dignity, and understand as much as we can who they are and what they need, they do become more productive. And they do create a more positive culture in which they're impacting other employees and retention. And so everything goes up. So satisfaction goes up, productivity goes up, quality goes up, all those things go up. The caution I have with that, and I do mention this in my research a little bit, is that I don't want spirituality to become a commodity, to become another, well, be sure that you pay attention to people's spirituality because you're going to get more out of them type of thing.
Exactly.
It's not that cut and dry. And we can take anything and just make something less than positive.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the pitfalls around the conversation of employee engagement. When we start by talking about employee engagement as, oh, well, there's all this research that shows engaged people are more productive and loyal, and it impacts, revenue and turnover positively. Yeah, there is a business case for it, but there's a human case for it first. And if you're going to go to work, you need to be thinking about the human part of it, I think, first and foremost, because then the business decisions are logically linked to the human needs. And you can tie your outcomes to the people doing the work clearly that way. So yes, there is a benefit that comes from it, but you don't do it for the benefit. You do it because this is how human beings walking this earth should treat each other.
And the flip side of that is if you don't do it, you're going to see the downside in your business. You're going to see the people who are not engaged. You're going to see the people who leave to, for better opportunities. So yes, do the right thing, and the benefit's there.
Exactly.
The benefit is there.
Well, I think that for me, this comes back to love. I want the best.
Yeah.
It's how am I treating people? And I'm not treating them according to necessarily a policy or because I want something from them. I'm treating them in the way that I believe is right.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And I think this is a good place for us to talk about, how we treat people and sacred work, because you're putting the meaning, the purpose of the work, whatever you're doing, eventually ties back to how am I treating the people that I work with, I lead, I serve, who are going to use whatever product or service that I'm providing. It all has that connection, and you're making it, the purpose is to want the best for people.
Yeah, I love that you go back to just want the best for people, because it really simplifies things that can seem very complicated. And they're not. We can make them complicated when we think about them and talk about them and philosophize about them. But it's very simple. I want the best for you.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? It also takes me back to the Sacred Encounters work, which I love so much, because when we use the term sacred, and I've had to struggle with that just a little bit, is because so many people have that religious connotation to that. But as we know, it's about that inner self. It's about that encounter, recognizing the humanity in that person that we're interacting with. And it isn't just about leader-follower relationships. It's about your friendships. It's about every single person, every single interaction, encounter, as St. Joseph Health used the word, every single encounter is a sacred encounter. And in a way, that's like a liberating thought to me. It's like this freeing thought. Back to what we were talking about, I don't have to think about, am I going to judge you? Do I like you? Do I think, you're a good person or a bad person? Or what part of Peggy am I going to bring forward right now? Am I being leader Peggy? Am I being, which Peggy am I being? Yeah. It is so liberating to just automatically assume you're dealing with a human being that's essentially has worth, and that I can be myself.
It's liberating. It's also empowering, because it says, every function, every type of work has the potential to be sacred, to bring purpose to life, so that every time I go and empty the trash, I am making the environment better. It's not just about, the leader on stage, the nurse at the bedside, the fill in the blank. Every job is noble. And we have to remember that, because if it's worth doing, that means somebody with worth is doing it. Like it's connected that way. I've been thinking a lot these days about the fact that I think we are made to work, and we've kind of forgotten that, because work is work. Whether you believe in a maker or evolution, what we know when we look at our physical bodies is that we're made for work. We have opposable thumbs. We're bipedal. We have big brains. there is in us not just the ability or capability, but the drive to move through the world and change it. And that's work.
I love the way you think.
Thank you.
I love how your brain works.
So if we're made for work, why don't we make work something that we get to make? I mean, of course, it's hard. There are plenty of things that I would rather do than, sit down and prepare invoices or whatever. And one of the ways we can satisfy the drive to change the world around us with our hands, our feet, our heads, our hearts, is pulling it back to the fact that human beings have intrinsic worth.
Yes.
We have an inner life, we have a spirit, a soul, and that means that the work of our hands or heads is also worthy.
I love that concept. And think about back to the person, based on what you said, back to the person who comes in and takes out the trash, or the person that files an insurance claim. If you believe that, you're going to treat them differently, as we've said. So I can interact, I can have an encounter in any of those situations, but we'll go back to the person taking out the trash. If they feel worthless, a lot of it has to do with how I treat them.
Yeah.
If they step into my space, they may have intrinsic worth and walk into the job that day feeling pretty good because they had a good morning or whatever. I can take them down to feel worthless so quickly.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that it is definitely in our power. And they can do the same to me.
Yeah.
Depending on how we interact, or if they don't speak. If someone just doesn't speak to you, which happens so often when you see people that you judge harshly somehow, then you don't give them the time of day, and you both leave that encounter just feeling less than. So back to what you say, yes, if we just all believed in human worth, and if we all wanted to do this, I just want to help you be your best.
It's important to acknowledge that, yes, we all have intrinsic worth, and humans still make mistakes.
Oh, yes.
The best of us are selfish and short-sighted, choose wrong over right, and we're still worthy of love, of grace.
Mm-hmm.
You know my motto, people are awful. You gotta love them.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth. There's a lot of truth to that. And so if it goes back to judgment, and if I go back to the sacred encounters, the sacred encounter, for domains of dignity, caring, compassion, and connection, caring and compassion, you just cannot forget. And when I make a mistake and someone treats me compassionately, understands, cares about me, helps me remedy that mistake, or just gives me grace, I feel like I have worth.
Yeah.
Again, just the judgment that we place on people, or even if we're not placing it on them, if what we're saying to ourselves is I'm better than, that comes across as judgment. And so we always have to, that humility, you see now we bring another concept in, but it's humility. The humility is so important.
I think through the course of this conversation, the importance of not turning yourself off, right? I go back to that, like leave it at the door.
Yeah.
That lie, it makes it easier to distance yourself from other people because you've created all of these layers. Every time you turn yourself off, it's another layer. So of course you can think, I'm different, I'm better, I'm worse even, right? So yeah, it's about humility, but it's also about authenticity.
It's very much about authenticity. And we are very afraid to be authentic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well,
and
so
you
much
do
of
get
this
shot down. I mean, honestly, I have been authentic and regretted it. There's a real world out there, and there's realistic, you have to be realistic about not everybody's going to get it. You are going to have people that you walk out thinking, wow, that they just made me feel awful about myself. And then you have to pick yourself up, own it a little bit, whatever your contribution to that conversation was. And sometimes it's just reality is I feel really crummy right now because of that interaction. Or maybe I made someone feel crummy. But if you did, then you can take the personal responsibility of circling back to that person and following up. But we know people aren't all going to do that. And so many people are not in that space yet. But I still see it as a continuum. and I see it as evolution. And I have huge hope that our expectations of leaders are going to continue in that direction.
I think what we've started talking about is when we're driven by fear of authenticity, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, all of the thousands of things that we're afraid of every minute of the day. It depletes our ability to be true, to be loving, to bring purpose into the work.
Mm-hmm.
And the work can be my day-to-day job, but it can also be how I'm engaging with other people around me.
I mean, I experience that. I'm sure you do, but I will be self-protective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I will definitely protect myself. But the more I can feel I can be authentic, the better day I'm going to have and the better experience I'm going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a work in progress. We just have to keep working at it, be the best we can be, and teach others to be the best they can be, and model the behavior. You know, that's what leaders do. They model the behavior. Be real, be authentic, trust each other. This is going to be okay.
I want to come back to, at the risk of being a broken record, the people are awful, because it's kind of what we're talking about. I'm fearless and I'm self-protected. So awful, awe, and full. Awe is something is so big and amazing that it can actually produce a little bit of fear in us. People's nature is full of awe in some ways. And sometimes it's awesome. And sometimes it's awful. Sometimes we do wonderful things, and sometimes we need grace. And extending that not just to everyone around you, but to yourself as well is really important. And I think leaders have to face the fear and forgive themselves when they fold to it.
Yes. I think the self-awareness and the self-forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
We can sit here and talk about how we believe it should be, knowing that in reality, I'm not always that person. And you're not always that person. And the people we're with aren't always those people. But to strive to be that way is the best that we can do. To know where we're headed and just keep trying to be that better person. Yeah. And if I go back to that concept of sacredness and relationship and that mutuality and connectedness, we do that through and with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so just keep finding those people that help bring out the best in us, that keep us learning to be better and reinforcing that good behavior, I'll call it, both within ourselves and within others, and give everyone grace when we fall, because we're going to fall. We always do.
Yeah, we always do.
Yeah.
I go back to the definition of spirituality, that personal process. What we're talking about is person-centered work. Purpose can be derived from how we treat the people around us.
What if I'm reflecting on what you just said and kind of reflecting on the conversation so far, and I'm thinking about all those concepts that we have pulled in. We started with spirituality and leadership, and look where we've gone.
Yeah.
Like look where we've gone. It's exciting, and I feel good, and I love the conversation. I mean, what if these conversations just happened? It isn't like put this bolt in this part in this way, because it is so personal and it is so individual. Just to open the door to talk about it can go a long way, and pull in things like, what are my needs? How do I have empathy? Yes, I believe in respect all humans. Like, just have the conversation. And I know in my work, there's been lots of opportunities over the years with certain individuals or even certain groups that you just end up there. But when they happen, they're so powerful.
Well, even in because yes, put this bolt in this place.
Mm-hmm.
That work also needs to be done, and there needs to be clarity and direction and routine and process. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about it as you are a capable, competent person, you have value and worth, these directions are not to infantilize you, they are to enable and empower you.
Exactly.
It doesn't actually take more time. It takes me a different effort, a different mindset. And at the end of the day, that's going to be more efficient and effective.
I think you're exactly right. We can all do that. It doesn't matter what industry we're with.
Agreed.
We have to understand that being technical or being in a financial industry or being in a industry that's just completely based on productivity and numbers never excludes you from being human. And somehow we've decided it does.
Every time I've heard you talk about your research, back when you were writing your dissertation and we were working together to now, there's one memory that always crops up, and it's this beautiful picture that I got to capture of a moment when I was the HR director at a small hospital in the area. I was doing my daily rounding. I came down a hallway that gave me a view into a patient room, and one of our nurses was there and had the patient sitting up in a chair and was brushing her hair. It was this beautiful image. I'm like, that was a sacred encounter. She was performing an act of physical care. She was maintaining that woman's dignity. It is a memory that I will not let go, because I want to always ask myself, how can I provide that moment for people as a leader, as a consultant, as a coach? What are the things I can do in the course of getting the work done? Because I know this nurse didn't go in just to brush this woman's hair.
No.
I know that there were technical things that happened in that encounter as well. But how can I gently brush the hair of the people I encounter? I'm so grateful to this woman that I got to see her doing this.
That is such a beautiful description of what we're talking about. It's just a perfect description, because that brushing of that person's hair was a demonstration of dignity and understanding that there's a human being sitting in front of me that deserves dignity and respect and is whole. I have to do 65 other things that include
At least.
equipment and computers.
Yeah.
But that hairbrushing meant more to both the caregiver and the cared for than anything else that nurse was going to do that day. Anything. I can guarantee you anything else that nurse was going to do that day.
We're at this point with technology, and it's scary and it's unknown. It's uncertain. I believe, though, that we are about to enter an era where the technology takes care of a lot of the 65 things. But we have the potential now that we're going to get to do more of that human interaction.
I so hope you're right.
Instead of us feeling like, oh, it's going to take away my job, what it's going to do for us is allow us to be more human. And that's one of the reasons I think talking about sacred work is so important right now, because we have to keep grounding ourselves in humanness, the best sort, I want the best for you. We get to be more ourselves, and we need to be prepared to be whole humans in our lives.
That'll be shocking for some
connected
people.
in community, right?
Yes, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but it
yes,
will be.
Because we're so compartmentalized. It's like, I can be this person, I can be this Peggy here and that Peggy there. And just think if our job is to actually become more human in some way.
I think it's so exciting. And it's
exciting.
this inflection point, right? Like, it could go to this really better way for us to do work and live our lives, or we could really mess it up. And I suspect we're going to end up somewhere in between.
We will.
At the end of the day. But there's so much potential right now for us to bring more meaning and purpose and love and soul to our work.
Well, it's why I was really excited to talk to you today and sit in my comfy chair where and I am literally sitting in a very comfortable chair to talk about it, because I like the thought of that we're at an inflection point. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but I think that this is the timing in our world, in our society, and everything that's happening right now is perfect for us to really deliberately take another look
Mm-hmm.
and move things toward
Mm-hmm.
being human.
Yeah.
Even though our fear, like I get afraid of AI, but to hear you say that, yeah, let AI do what AI does, but then let us do what we do as people. I love that thought. I'm going to hang on to that one, Kate.
If we can use it to enhance, use it to take a lot of the drudgery away, I just like I lose language thinking about how we could advance and become more whole, more fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having to do less of the grind work that comes with so much of like knowledge work and things like nursing as well, that if that drudgery goes away, what else do you get to do?
If you think about the language we use in leadership that we've used for so many years, which I really dislike, and I think it's starting to soften a little. You've got your hard skills
Oh,
and you got your soft skills.
yeah.
And it's just maddening to me to have to use that language, and we still use it. But does that give us an opportunity? All of this conversation that we've had, plus the introduction of AI, does it give us an opportunity to, redefine, stop using that language? Because hard skills becomes good and soft skills become optional when you're talking about it.
Correct.
So mandatory hard skills, optional soft skills. So all of this conversation, including the support of technology in the future, could we begin to change that language, change the expectation, and ensure that those human skills become mandatory?
Mm-hmm.
We still really put them aside and make them, if you have time, you can treat people well, kind of thing.
People are so black or white, binary, this or that.
Yeah.
And how can we think holistically about things? It's not, when I ran patient experience, patient experience is not what you do when you're done doing the other stuff.
That's a great example.
It's the whole thing. And leading people in a way that acknowledges their inner selves is about how you do the whole thing. This is why, again, people are awful. You gotta love them. Gotta love them. I love how silly humans are. This is really, we know better and we don't do better.
But we will.
Yeah.
I am the eternal optimist. We will.
Is there anything in this conversation that you want to make certain we don't miss?
I've really loved the conversation and how so many, what seem sometimes as separate or disparate concepts around leadership in particular, when we have a conversation like this, they all end up in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where this conversation started, which was around the sacred, around the spiritual, around that inner self and meaning. I guess I would boil it all down to meaning in work. To have a conversation like we did, where it was very back and forth, and we started with, well, this is what we're going to talk about, but it went everywhere.
Yeah.
But it ended with what we intended to talk about. And I feel, to my earliest points, a better person, a smarter person, and actually a really much more energized person than when I walked in this room. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And you're welcome. I love when we get to have conversations like this.
Not often enough. So I'm really glad you're doing this Comfy Chairs podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and all of your thinking and all of your leadership over the years too.
Thanks, Kate.
Something I want to close with, Peggy, is to acknowledge the fact that for me, as somebody I used to work for directly, you were a leader that you did the things that you say you wanted to model. That as your employee, I always felt my work had purpose, that I had worth, and that my whole self was what you wanted and expected of me. And I think I am a better leader, thinker, worker for having gotten to be your employee. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that, Kate.
Mean it with my whole heart. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating or review, or share it with others. You'll find Comfy Chairs updates and other thoughts on leadership and learning on Instagram at 123 Limited. That's ONE23 LTD.